Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, dear community, with that said, my guest tonight, in the words of Deepak Chopra, is a rare blend of scientist, visionary, and scholar with the ability to speak to our minds while touching the wisdom of our hearts. Please join me in welcoming our friend Gregg Braden. Welcome.
I am so honored to be with you, Alexander, and I am really excited for this conversation and to share this information with our Russian family. I want to give my love to my Russian community, my Russian family, and this is unrehearsed, so I will follow your lead like a dance. I will let you lead this dance, and let's see where we go.
Thank you so much. Of course, dear friends, you know who Greg is, but just, as a reminder, he is a 5-time New York Times bestselling author. He's a scientist, he's an international educator, and renowned as a pioneer in the emerging paradigm based in science, social policy, and human potential. Greg's work has led to 15 film credits, 12 award-winning books, now published in over 40 languages, of course Russian including, and numerous awards. He has presented his discoveries in over 34 countries on 6 continents. That is really impressive, Greg, and I'm really honored that you joined us. Of course, you are well known to our Russian audience through your 2 marvelous online courses that we launched. One is called Wired to Thrive, and the other one is a Wisdom Codes, and the 7 books that have been published in Russian. Let me start by saying, by giving you a little testimonial from one of our audience, Olga. She says, Greg, I respect you very much. When I meet Greg, I would thank him from the bottom of my heart. Gregg Braden, thank you for the books, for all the practices you shared with us. All information is useful and interesting. Having received knowledge, I'm happy to apply it in my beautiful life. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Well, Olga, if you are watching this, thank you for sharing your heart with me and for acknowledging the impact that this information has had in your life. You know, Alexander, before we begin the questions, I'm just going to share, I did an interview recently with an interviewer that the interview did not go as expected. So I'm going to say that. So the first thing the interviewer said to me was, Greg, why can't you stay with one topic like everybody else? He said, why can't you just focus on one topic? He said, you're all over the place. He said, are you talking about the human heart and heart intelligence, or DNA, or ancient civilizations, or the magnetic fields of the earth? He said, just stay with one topic. And I wasn't expecting that. And I thought about it, and I said, every book that I've written explores one facet of our experience here on earth, one facet of our relationship, the human body and our planet and our world. And I said, in a very real sense, I have stayed with one topic. The topic is us, and it's a very big topic. And he said, okay, let's go to station break, and he never came back. So what Olga is saying is important for me to hear, because everyone learns differently. And some people will be more drawn to one of those topics, maybe the topic of the human heart or our relationship with another person. Other people want to know about the science or the ancient history or the indigenous wisdom. So thank you, Olga, for sharing that and for supporting his work in all the ways that you do. I appreciate that.
And thank you. In your own words, since you mentioned that you covered different aspects, but with the same focus, in your own words, what is your core message when you cover DNA and ancient civilizations and the codes that are in the verbiage and the language? What is the central core message that is in your work?
Before I answer that, I want to acknowledge and thank my brother Andre for being my Russian voice. So thank you so much for making this possible, Andre. I appreciate it. My Russian is terrible, so thank you. And Alexander, this is a beautiful question to begin. Uh, the core message for me is that we are absolutely not what we have been told, and we are absolutely so much more probably than we've even allowed ourselves to imagine. We're only beginning to understand the deep truth of what it means to be human.
Mm.
And the reason this is important, the context, this work is not occurring in a vacuum. It is within the context of a world that is changing in ways that we've never seen. It is in the context of ideas in a world that are pushing us in a direction that does not take into account our humanness. So we have been taught for at least 3 generations now. We've been taught that the human body is flawed as a system, that we are flawed beings, that we are weak, vulnerable, that human emotion is a flaw that clouds our logic and our ability to think clearly, that our memories are cherished, our most cherished memories are actually the root of conflict and our belief systems, the root of the conflict, and that all of these are flaws in our makeup, and that technology is the answer to those flaws. So the technology, now the proposals are that technology replace much of our humanness, that chips replace our cognitive capacities, the artificial intelligence replace our ability to think clearly, that polymers replace our skin. And this movement is now being made possible because the technology has evolved so quickly and so recently, and a lot of people don't know this. So I want to be very clear. I'm a scientist. I believe in science. I've worked in the high-tech industries from the 1970s when I was in the corporations, 1980s, early 1990s. The technology is not good, bad, right, or wrong. It's how the technology is applied. It's the thinking underlying the technology. And the thinking is that we need something outside of ourselves to be healthy in life and to be successful in business, to be successful in the world. And as we embrace these external technologies, as we embrace sensors in our organs and chips in our brain and chemicals in our blood, here's what the science shows, is that our natural biology begins to atrophy. We begin to lose the very essence of the humanness that we cherish in this generation. And if we go down that road, if we choose to follow that technological path to that degree, the next generation, we begin to lose some of the very precious aspects that separate us from all other forms of life. The ability for empathy, sympathy, compassion, the ability to self-regulate our own biology in a way that no other form of life can. So my message is that we're at a crossroad in the world of science and biology and humanness. And I think it's important that we understand who we are and what does it really mean to be human, and what is the full extent of our human capabilities before we give them away forever to technology. And I have other colleagues, my dear friend, my spiritual brother, Dr. Joe Dispenza, from his perspective is helping us to understand. My dear brother, my friend, Dr. Bruce Lipton, is helping us to understand from his perspective. Lynn McTaggart, from the perspective of the field and our relationship to the field. So I'm not alone in this. But my unique perspective is to focus on the human body, literally, Alexander, as a soft technology. We are a highly advanced, technologically sophisticated, soft technology we're not made of computer chips and artificial intelligence and sensors in the body. We are made of neurons and cell membranes and specialized, very specialized chemical environments in the blood, in the cells. And we're the only form of life that can self-regulate. We can change what this soft technology is doing. And this is what's so interesting to me. We don't know the upper limits of our potential. We don't know the limits of our capacity. So, for example, people will say to me, Gregg, the human brain is no match for a computer chip. The computer chips are faster. And they are absolutely correct. I agree with that 100%. But here's the piece that's missing. A computer chip is limited by the laws of physics for the element it is made of. A computer chip can only go so far within the context of the element it is made of, silicon, for example. And then it is maxed out. It is not scalable. The human neuron, the human brain, we do not know the upper limits of our scalability. And let me give you, and I know Joe talks about this, he and I have had this conversation many times. When I was in school, back in the 1950s, 1960s, and in the last century, the 50s, 60s, and 70s, we thought that the upper end of the capacity of the human brain was about 40 cycles per second, 40 hertz. Yeah. And then we began to discover the Tibetans came and they demonstrated states of meditation that exceeded that. So we went from 40 hertz up to 80 hertz. And scientists said, well, we made a mistake, but that has to be the top end. We can't possibly go beyond 80 hertz. And the Tibetans said, well, if we do a different kind of meditation, we can exceed that. And then they pushed the limits up to 100 cycles per second, 100 hertz. And we had to create a new brain state called the gamma brain state. And the scientists said, okay, we'll change the textbooks, but this is it. The human brain can't possibly go any more than this. And the Tibetans said, well, if we do a different kind of meditation, and you get the idea, they began doing different kinds of focus, breath, and meditative states, and they went from 100 cycles per second to 130, to 150, to 180, to 200, and now we're over 200 cycles per second, 200 cycles per second, 200 hertz, in what is called the hyper gamma brain state. And now new brain states are being discovered. And I'm using this to demonstrate the point. We are scalable, and we don't know the top end of our scalability. And the other thing is that a computer chip is run based upon what's called a CPU, a central processing unit, a clock, an internal clock that is doing the processing. The human brain doesn't have a single CPU. What we do is we distribute the information and process it through all the brain states in parallel simultaneously in a way that is not done in the computer chips as we know them today. So this is just one example of where we don't know. We are scalable and we don't know the top end of our scalability, whereas the physical chip, it's fast, absolutely fast, but it has limits that are not scalable. So we're only beginning to understand what that really means. And my sense, Alexander, is the better we understand our own capabilities, the less urgent we will feel is the need to replace our biology with machines. The less urgent, so this is the transhuman movement, the less urgent the transhuman movement will be to us, because we remember that we are that technology. And we don't want to give away our potential before we know what it is. So I think we owe it to ourselves to discover what it truly means to be human. What is our human potential before we give it away to the technology? So it's a long answer to a short question of what the theme of this work is all about.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think we are scalable as a community. When we add one human to another human, computers don't do this, even though our architecture may be similar to the computers. But when you start adding several humans united with one idea, synchronized in their hearts and in their minds, there is no limit to how far we can go. And
yeah, well, that absolutely true. And you know, this is such a deep conversation, and it's such a vital conversation that we rarely have, Alexander. And this is why I appreciate the opportunity to share this with you and my Russian family. And it's a conversation that we must have, and we're not having it with our young people. Our young people are not being taught how precious a human life is. They're being taught that a human life is flawed, that emotions cloud our logic, that the sentimental nature of our memories, the things that we remember from the past, is a flaw. We're being taught that our ability to reproduce the way that we always have is a flaw, because sometimes the reproduction is successful, sometimes it's not. So we're being taught that we can fix all that with CRISPR technology and gene editing and artificial intelligence. And the part that's being missed in all of this is that these are the very characteristics that we cherish as a species and a society. And we have to make a choice now. This isn't in the future. This is actually happening right now. If we don't make it very clear, we have to determine what values we cherish as individuals, as families, communities, and societies, and allow the technology to serve us rather than becoming slaves to a technology and losing our humanness. And it can happen very, very quickly.
Unfortunately, I cannot not agree with you, because this is happening in our lives. We are at the precipice from what it feels, and we have been bombarded with all this supposed to be technical advances, which is what? Which is only mimicking what we can do with our own senses, with our own human neurological networks.
Well, this is where now we can get into. I'll ask your permission. Are you okay if we get into a very deep philosophical conversation?
Oh, please, please, please be my guest. I'm all for it, Greg.
So I'm a multidisciplinary scientist. My primary degree is in the earth sciences as a geologist, geophysics, but I do have a strong background in the life sciences, marine biology, math, physics, chemistry, computer science, and archaeology. And all of these have helped me, this multidisciplinary background have helped me stay current with new discoveries. And there is an emerging philosophy in the scientific community that reflects on this conversation right now. And so I'm going to share it with our viewers. The philosophy is this, that consciousness informs itself through its creations. So, Andre, thank you for helping me to translate this. I hope it translates well. That consciousness informs itself through the things that it creates. And what that means is that the books that we write, the art that we create, sculpture, music. I'm a musician when I'm not a writer. The music that we create, all of that is us telling us something about ourselves in the world out there. And this includes movies. This includes the Hollywood movie. Look at the movies that have been absolute success. The movie The Matrix, for example, told us that there's a world that we cannot see that influences the world that we can see, and that we live in both of those worlds. Now, there was a lot of other stuff going on, but that was the theme. And the movie Avatar, such a beautiful movie, reminding us of the deep relationship we have with the natural world. The movie, I mean, young people's movies, Harry Potter, Wonder Woman, The Avengers, all reminding us that we have abilities within us that haven't been tapped. So the question is, what are we asking ourselves to remember about ourselves through the things that we create? If this is true, technology has to be a part of this. So we look at the technology we're building outside of us, and you said this directly, Alexander, that technology mimics what we already are inside of our bodies and what we already do, except we do it better. So every cell in our bodies has an electrical potential of about 0.07 volts. Small, but we've got about 50 trillion cells in the body. And you do the math, that's 3.5 trillion volts of electrical potential in the human body, if we focused it. Every cell in our body is a transistor, it's a resistor, it's a capacitor. Every cell in our body emits photons and receives photons. That's light. Light is information. We are transmitting information into the field and receiving information. This is a really interesting one. Every strand of DNA stores its information in a transparent record of every genetic transaction that's ever occurred. We're now building that outside of us. It's called blockchain technology.
Yeah.
This is what Bitcoin and Ethereum and all these. Blockchain mimics the way that human DNA stores information and transactions. Every cell in our body stores information just the way the computer chips are doing. So this philosophy says that we are building in the world outside of us a record or examples of who we are in here, constantly reminding ourselves of who we are in here. The internet, beautiful example of how we are connected, how neurons connect, how star systems connect, and how human intelligence connects. So it's a very different way of looking. But when we start to think of the world in this way, we realize that we so long for our wholeness. We so desire our completeness that we are engineering a world outside of our bodies that is constantly reminding us of who we are in here. And as we awaken this inner technology, then we empower ourselves, and in an empowered state, we are much less fearful of the changes in the world. The world changes look scary because we don't know who we are. And as we embrace the deep truth of our humanness, those changes will still happen, but they take on a new meaning. And I think this is a very, very powerful message for where we are right now, because our humanness, our biology is being threatened by technology. And if we don't know that, we will give ourselves away to the technology. And once, what the science shows, once computer chips begin to replace neurons, for example, the natural ability to create those neurons begins to atrophy. I don't know how that word translates, but we begin to lose the ability to create those neurons in the way that we have in the past, or the immune system that we have in the past, or the stem cell rejuvenation system that we have in the past. So I think we owe it to ourselves to be honest with ourselves and to know, what does it mean to be human, and to awaken the deep truth of our humanness, and to do it now in this generation, because of the story that we are being given through the world of technology.
Very powerful, that, Greg. I can't stop thinking about this precipice and the choice that every one of us is making at the individual level, whether or not we would give our power away to these technologies. And ladies and gentlemen, friends, Greg is a scientist. He is disclosing the real danger. If the technology cannot be controlled then it will overpower our humanity and our divinity as a final counts.
Well, I want to speak to divinity as well, because to many, and I couldn't agree more, Alexander, and thank you for bringing that word into the conversation. The word divinity, to many people, they now associate that with religion or spirituality, and it turns them off.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at the definition of divinity, it is the ability to well, there are a couple of different definitions. In general, the definition of divinity is the ability to transcend the perceived limits of our humanness. So when we assign divinity to a god, you know, or the ancient ideas of gods or a higher being, this is what we're saying, that they have abilities to become more than the limitations. And we have that divinity as well. And we're only beginning to understand, you know, what this really means. One of the places where I think this is coming up very quickly, and I'll just give another example here. When I was in school, again, back in the 50s, 60s, 1970s, and the 20th century, we were teaching that when a human is born into this world, the number of neurons in the brain is fixed. It's a set number. And the joke in the 1960s, you know, was every time you drink a beer or every time you do something else, you're losing brain cells. Now we know that the human brain is producing new neurons up until the last breath of life that we take. And it's coming from a very, very specific part of the brain. So we're constantly producing new neurons. Here's the catch. Here's the catch. Those new neurons must be engaged in a meaningful way within 2 weeks of being produced, or they will atrophy and die. So when you have young people, a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old that wakes up in the morning, they eat breakfast, and they put on a virtual reality goggles, okay, a visor. And for hours during the day, they are being inundated with brilliant colors and scenes and situations and sounds that they would never encounter if they go into their backyard to play. But here's the thing. They are observing all of these experiences being done for them by the AI, which is very different from engaging our imagination and our own creativity. That's what stimulates the neurons. So when the young people are engaged for hours a day having everything done for them in the AI, they are losing the ability to engage these neurons in their own mind. And the studies are showing very clearly, young people, the longer they are engaged in at early ages in AI environments, that their cognitive development is taking a hit. They're parts of, so the visual cortex thickens in the brain, and that changes the way they think and see the world. And their ability to socialize, obviously, is less developed because they're not interacting with other humans. So this is happening right now. We have a generation of young people whose cognitive abilities and the ability to create and imagine are being negatively impacted through the technology and the way it's being used. That's just one example. Just one example.
This is not scary, but alarming, shall I say?
Well, so let's talk about the good news. The good news is the science is very clear that everything that we're building outside of us, we already do inside of us. And people don't, it's almost too much to even believe. But we have the ability to change the way that we think, the way we feel, the way that we breathe. And when we do that, we stimulate and awaken aspects of ourselves. So for example, 1991, scientists discovered neurons in the human heart. And we always think of brain, typically we think of neurons in the brain. And they said, well, what do you mean neurons in the heart? Well, there is about 40,000 specialized neurons in the human heart. They're called sensory neurites. It's a neural network. Here's where it gets interesting. That neural network in the heart, it thinks independently of the brain. It feels independently of the brain. It remembers independently of the brain. And it records information in a very precise way. Well, the science now is also showing we're the only form of life that can actually harmonize these two neural networks. We can tune or harmonize the neural network in the brain, the neural network in the heart, into one single potent system in the body. And when we do that, the benefits are vast. So I'll just list some of the benefits. By harmonizing the heart and the brain, it's called coherence, heart-brain coherence. When we do this, just by creating that coherence, we stimulate the immune system to a greater degree than many pharmaceutical antibiotics can do. When the scientists, when they were studying the saliva, which is the first line of immune defense in our mouth. When they were studying the saliva of people that were doing this coherence, they sent samples of the saliva and the white blood called leukocytes to independent labs. And so the labs were calling saying, wow, what is this antibiotic? We've never seen anything like this. And the scientists said, this isn't antibiotic, this is human potential. And they said, no. You just don't want to tell us because it's so powerful. And they said, no, this is natural immunity. So that's just one example. Harmonizing the heart and the brain, we stimulate the immune system on demand. We awaken longevity enzymes on demand. And the beauty of longevity is if you are living longer, it's not just about living longer. If you're living longer, it means that you are healing along the way. You must be healing to achieve the longevity. So deeper states of healing, by harmonizing heart and the brain, greater states of resilience to change. We live in a world that's changing faster than any of us have ever experienced. And for many people, it's very stressful. When you can increase what's called heart rate variability, HRV, what that means is the time from one heartbeat to the next heartbeat, to the next, to the next, to the next. It varies between each beat. It's called the QRS complex. And from the top of that peak, it's the QR, R is the top of that peak. From one R wave to the next, to the next, to the next, it's not the same amount of time. It varies. And the more variation you have, the more resilient you are to change. So when we're children, we have very high HRV. And as we age, as we get older, the term, you often hear this, is we become set in our ways. We become accustomed to the way life is, and we lose the heart rate variability. The heart rate becomes more and more regular. So by harmonizing the heart and the brain, we actually increase heart rate variability. We increase our resilience to change. We lower the stress levels in our bodies. And stress is the root of the inflammation that is the root of most of the major diseases. Heart disease, diabetes, many cancers are linked to inflammation resulting from stress. So then where this is interesting, stress is more than a bad relationship or more than bad traffic. When you drink water that has impurities, or you eat food that's been cooked in oils that have impurities or are not good for you, your body has to work to compensate for those impurities. That's a form of stress, and you don't even know it. You don't even know it's there. But this actually relieves that stress. So these are some of the direct benefits from harmonizing the heart and the brain that we can benefit from every day, from heart-brain coherence. Beyond that, there are advanced states of cognition, super memory, super recall, super learning that exceed what the computer chips can do. And we have access to all of that. So this is the good news. We are a soft technology, a highly advanced, technologically sophisticated, soft technology, self-programmable, self-healing, and self-upgradable. And the keys to do this are preserved in our most ancient and cherished indigenous and spiritual traditions. Thought, feeling, emotion, breath, and focus, and how we use these. And once we begin to embrace this, Alexander, what we find is we don't feel that we need to give ourselves away to the external technology. And the risks of having a chip in the brain or chemicals in the blood or sensors in the organs, they all come with risks. And we don't need to take those risks. So
not only that, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Greg, for alarming us to this situation. Friends, our bodies are a soft technology that you can and you should, with your permission, Greg, and you should control, because if you don't, somebody else will, with the power of their technology, because technology, if not controlled, will definitely take control of us. It's always controlled and created by someone with, we don't know what kind of interests, what kind of agenda, and so I'm summarizing some of the important takeaways from the last 30 minutes, and we have about probably time for about one last question, and I'm at lost which one to choose, because I have a couple of them which are I'm hesitant. Okay.
Well, do two questions and I'll just speak quickly.
Okay. In your latest marvelous Wisdom Codes book, which fascinates me because I study English language and I'm also writing the book, and I was kind of upset that Greg already released his book and my book is still not ready about the etymology of the English and how it was designed, because for me English was a design language with the very specific meaning, input and energies into the word, like spelling, cast, and all of that, all these hacks. So in this beautiful book, which has been translated into Russian and is a very practical book, you explore an idea that the word has the power to influence the expression of genes.
Yeah.
So what's the mechanism behind this, in short?
Yeah, this is fascinating to me. What we now know, what the neurologists, neuroscientists tell us, is that the words that we use to describe our relationship to ourselves, to one another, to the world around us, to the future, to the past, verbally, as well as the words that we think. Scientists tell us that we think about between 60 and 80,000 thoughts per day, and those every 24 hours. And we're using words to think about our relationship to the world. So those words determine not only how we think, but the words determine what we are even capable of thinking about, what we can even conceive. And the reason is because the words influence our biology. The words that we use determine how the neurons in our heart and our brain, how they connect together, so how they wire, and the term is wire and fire, how those neurons connect, and then the information that is transmitted through those connections. So this is kind of a mind blower, because we think and we believe that we can imagine anything, and the truth is that our imagination is confined to the neural network that our worldview allows us to have. So we don't even know what it is that we cannot think about, because we're living in this perceptual box of this neural network. So those words also influence the way that DNA is able to express in the body. And this is fascinating to me. A lot of people think DNA is just like floating around in the liquid in the cells, and it's not. The DNA is wrapped in a protein that's called chromatin. And the quality of the chromatin determines how the quality of how the DNA can express. And this makes a lot of sense. When the chromatin is tightly wrapped around the DNA, you can kind of visualize it. The DNA is not able to fully express. And when the chromatin is looser, the DNA has more freedom to express more fully. It's called spooling, spooling, spooling. So when we live in fear or anger or hate or rage or jealousy, those emotions will lock that chromatin tightly and the DNA cannot express fully. One of the places where, sadly, where the studies have been done is in the refugee camps from in Jordan, in the nation of Jordan, the Syrian refugees that have come across the border. Some of those children have only known life in a refugee camp. They were conceived in the refugee camp, they were born in the refugee camp, and that's the only world they know. They live in constant fear. So it's dangerous for them to go to the bathroom, to go to collect firewood. And that constant fear has biological consequences. So it affects their cognition. They are not cognitively developed where they should be. Their brain size is smaller. Their ability to think in certain ways is limited. And actually their body is smaller in proportion. And a lot of this is linked directly to living in constant fear, constant stress, locking down that chromatin so the DNA can't express. This is why it's important, when you harmonize the heart and the brain, and most of my books have the steps to do that. They're YouTube. I've got a dedicated, go to my YouTube channel, and I talk about in the YouTube channel. By harmonizing the heart and the brain for 3 minutes a day, what we do is we relieve that stress, and that relief can last up to 6 hours of the day and have the positive benefits from that. So literally, we are self-programming our own and self-modifying our own genetic expression, up-regulating genes on demand. So it's a really beautiful, I guess that was a long answer to your question, so maybe we don't get to the second. Let's just, what is the second question? And
yes.
No, I have one more interview, another interview after this, but let's go over a couple of minutes because I want to honor you and I want to honor our community, and I talked way too much in the last question.
But thank you. It's eye-opening. We need to hear that. I really appreciate. Maybe it's not a question, but let's try to sum up that we are at the precipice, right? We have to choose the way our civilization goes, technological or organic or natural evolution. And the technology is probably not a friend, but a foe. And in your Missing Link series in Gaia 2017, you clearly disproved that using the carbon prints in the Antarctic ice, you disproved the cyclical. You proved with the cyclical nature that with or without human civilization, we would still be going through the same global warming phenomena, which we're expecting now with the same patterns. So obviously there is an agenda there as well. Now, you have 250,000 heart-centered supporters in our community, and we will definitely head in the direction of spiritual development and not technological. But what do we say to our brothers and sisters, especially younger ones who are invested in the technology? How can we help them to make the right decision?
I think it's a very good question. What I would begin with the way that we began this program. I would invite them to embrace honestly, truthfully, factually, the fact that we are not what we have been told, and we are much more than we've been led to believe. The technology is actually mimicking what we already do in our bodies. And the technology is not right, wrong, good, or bad. I'm just going to say it's neutral. It simply exists. It's the thinking of how the technology is applied. So as we mature and embrace the truth of our humanness, I think we will find a place of balance where we can use the technology as a tool to serve us, but we don't give ourselves, our humanness away to the technology. And that is my hope. That's where I think we are at this critical crossroad right now. And I appreciate you sharing with your community and my Russian family, who I love from the other side of the world, that we're in this together. And if we can think about it less as right and wrong and good and bad, that's the polarity that keeps us stuck in the fear. If we can simply embrace the deep truth of our humanness and become the best version of ourselves, I think we win the battle without fighting. We simply become the best version of ourselves, and then the other things take on a new meaning. And that's very different than feeling that we have to be out there, fight, 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 fight. That's the old way that keeps us stuck. You know, Buckminster Fuller was a brilliant visionary before he left this world. And I'll just close with a quote from him that I say to myself pretty much every day of my life. And what Buckminster Fuller said, he says, "You'll never change the world by fighting against the things you don't like." He says, if you want a better world, find a new way that makes the old way obsolete. And people will follow the new way, and the old way falls away. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. As we embrace the truth of our humanness, a lot of the beliefs that we have now will simply not make sense. They just won't make sense anymore. But we owe it to our young people who don't know any different and who are being inundated with misinformation and disinformation. We owe it to them to help them develop a deep appreciation for what it means to be a human in this world and how precious human life really is and the extraordinary potential that we have within us. And I think that's the best that we can do in our lifetime right now, Alexander.
Thank you so very much. Let's cherish this beautiful, marvelous gift of our humanity and our divinity, and let's keep our sovereignty. Let's not engage into a fight. We just say no to all those pushes of the matrix of the system.
That's right. We will rock this world into the beautiful world that we know is possible. That's the musician in me, the musician that wants to rock this world into the beautiful world we know is possible.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me onto the show. I'm going to send my love to my Russian family and my community, and I very much look forward to our next, Alexander. Thank you.
I so appreciate that. And when this madness is over, please come and visit us in Russia. We want to see you live in Moscow and other cities. Please, please, please.
Well, save me a hug, and I will take you up on that.
I will. Thank you.
God bless, brother. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.